when history students Emma and Jake agreed to document the long-abandoned Blackwood mansion. They expect creaky floors and dusty heirlooms, not a piano that plays itself at 2 a.m., or a name written in wet ink on sheet music left behind by a girl who died nearly a century ago. As eerie melodies echo through the halls and forgotten secrets rise from the shadows, the siblings realize that the mansion isn't just a relic of the past. It's a stage for something restless, something still performing. In Blackwood, the dead don't sleep, they play, and Emma and Jake are already part of the next movement. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the skeletal branches and casting eerie shadows against the old mansion's walls. The towering structure stood alone at the edge of town, abandoned for years, until now. Emma and Jake had always been fascinated by history, especially stories of forgotten places. When a local historian, Mr. Caldwell, offered them a chance to stay in the old Blackwood mansion for a month to document its history, they jumped at the opportunity. "This place is massive," Jake muttered as they stood before the grand estate. The windows, dark and lifeless, loomed over them like watching eyes. Emma adjusted her backpack, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. Creepy, but kinda beautiful too. The front door groaned as they pushed it open, revealing a grand foyer. A massive chandelier hung above, its once sparkling crystals dulled by time. Dust coated the antique furniture, and cobwebs clung to the wooden staircase like delicate lace. The scent of aged wood and something faintly metallic filled the air. But what caught Emma's attention was the grand piano in the corner. Unlike the rest of the mansion, it looked untouched, its polished surface gleaming under the dim light. Jake scoffed. "Bet it hasn't been played in decades." Emma stepped closer, her fingers grazing the ivory keys. She expected silence, but the moment her skin made contact, a single note rang out, low, deep, and resonant. They both froze. "That's weird," Jake muttered. "Maybe the strings are loose." Emma pulled her hand back, suddenly uneasy. "Let's just bring our stuff upstairs. A house that doesn't sleep." As night fell, the house settled into a strange stillness. Emma and Jake explored some of the rooms, taking notes and recording videos for their project. Most were empty, their past residents long gone, but traces of their lives remained. A forgotten doll on a rocking chair, faded photographs hanging crookedly on the walls, a diary with its last entry written decades ago. By midnight, exhaustion won over curiosity. The siblings retreated to their rooms, the heavy silence of the mansion pressing down on them. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., the sound began. A slow, haunting melody drifted through the halls. The piano was playing, by itself. Jake shot up in bed, heart hammering. "Emma," he called. Before he could grab his flashlight, his door creaked open. Emma stood there, pale and wide-eyed. "You heard that, right?" He nodded, and they moved cautiously toward the staircase. Following the ghostly tune, the melody grew clearer as they descended, delicate yet sorrowful, like a song of longing. It wasn't random notes. It was a composition. As they reached the foyer, the music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was heavier than before, like the house was holding its breath. Jake's gaze landed on the piano. Its lid was still open, but no one was there. Then Emma gasped and pointed. A single sheet of music rested on the stand. That wasn't there before, she whispered. Jake approached it cautiously. The paper looked old, the edges yellowed, but the ink, it was still wet. The name in the dark Emma shivered. Maybe it's some kind of old trick, a self-playing piano. Jake ran a hand over the keys. No mechanism, and besides, the ink. He hesitated. Someone wrote this recently. They examined the sheet music. The notes formed a song neither of them recognized, and at the top, in elegant cursive, was a name, Eleanor. Jake frowned. Eleanor, maybe she lived here. Emma grabbed her notebook and flipped through the mansion's history. Blackwood Mansion belonged to the Hargrove family. There was a daughter, Eleanor Hargrove. Jake exhaled. So, her name just appears on a music sheet out of nowhere. Emma looked around the dimly lit foyer, suddenly feeling watched. I don't know, but we need to find out. They decided to check the library, one of the few rooms they hadn't explored yet. As they moved through the halls, the floorboards creaked beneath their steps, and the shadows seemed to shift in the candlelight. The library was vast, filled with the towering bookshelves covered in dust. They searched for anything related to Eleanor, combing through journals and records. Then, Emma found it, a newspaper clipping dated nearly a century ago. Eleanor Hargrove, age 22, was found deceased in Blackwood Mansion. Cause of death, unknown. Jake's stomach twisted. Unknown. Emma nodded, scanning the article. She was a gifted pianist, but one night she was heard playing at 2 a.m., and by morning she was gone. The siblings exchanged uneasy glances. The piano played at 2 a.m., just like tonight. A chilling realization settled over them. The house wasn't abandoned. Someone was still here, and she had just begun to make her presence known. The library felt colder than the rest of the house, the air thick with dust and the weight of forgotten stories. Emma and Jake sat on the floor, their flashlight casting long shadows as they pored over the brittle newspaper clipping. Eleanor Hargrove, age 22, was found deceased in Blackwood Mansion. Cause of death, unknown. Jake ran a hand through his hair. So, Eleanor died here, and now a piano is playing by itself at 2 a.m. with her name on a freshly inked sheet of music. That's beyond weird. Emma traced the faded ink of the article. She was a pianist. Maybe this house is trying to tell us something. Sudden thump echoed from the hallway. They froze. Jake grabbed the flashlight, heart pounding. Did you hear that? Emma nodded, slowly standing. The sound had come from the foyer, where the piano stood. Cautiously, they crept back down the hall. The floorboards groaned beneath their feet, each step amplifying the silence around them. The mansion felt more alive now, as if it had awoken with them. When they reached the foyer, the piano was silent, its keys still. The sheet music from before was gone. Emma's breath hitched. Jake, it was right there. He scanned the room, but there was no sign of it. Maybe the wind took it. Emma shot him a look. There's no wind, Jake. The doors and windows are shut. A chill settled over them. Something had moved the paper. Something unseen. The hidden room determined to learn more. They returned to the library, digging through the house's records. Most of the documents were mundane. Property deeds, guest logs, letters, But then Emma found something unusual. A blueprint of Blackwood Mansion. She ran her fingers over the faded paper. "Look at this." Jake leaned in. "What am I looking at?" Emma pointed to a small walled-off space near the music room. "This section. It's not supposed to be there. It looks like a hidden room." Jake's eyes widened. "You think Eleanor's room was sealed off?" Emma nodded. "It's worth checking out." The music room. The music room was near the foyer, just past the grand staircase. Unlike the other rooms, it was relatively untouched. Faint moonlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating rows of antique instruments, violins, a harp, and, of course, another piano. Emma traced the edges of the wall, feeling for any inconsistencies. If the blueprints are right, there should be a hidden door somewhere here. Jake tapped along the wooden panels. Solid. Wait. He knocked against a section that sounded hollow. They exchanged glances. Jake pressed against the panel. At first, nothing happened, but then, with a faint click, a hidden door creaked open, revealing a dark passageway. A gust of cold air rushed past them. Emma shuddered. "This is a terrible idea." Jake turned on his flashlight and grinned nervously. "Yeah, let's do it." They stepped inside. The passageway was narrow, dust swirling in their wake. The walls were lined with old, tattered wallpaper, its floral pattern faded with age. At the end of the corridor stood a door, slightly ajar. Jake hesitated. "Ready?" Emma nodded. Together they pushed it open. Eleanor's room. The room was eerily preserved, as if someone had lived there just yesterday. A canopy bed stood in the corner, its silk curtains moth-eaten, but still hanging. A vanity mirror sat untouched, its surface clouded with time. The only thing out of place was the thick layer of dust covering everything. And then there was the piano. Unlike the grand piano in the foyer, this one was small, delicate, and covered with a white lace cloth. Emma approached it slowly. The keys were worn, as if played often. But what sent a shiver down her spine was the sheet music resting on the stand. The same sheet music from earlier. Jake whispered, "Emma, this is impossible." She reached out, running her fingers over the paper. The ink was still fresh. Suddenly, a whisper drifted through the room, a faint, sorrowful melody. Emma whipped around. "Did you hear that?" Jake swallowed hard. "Yeah." The melody grew louder, though the piano remained untouched. It was as if something was playing, but unseen. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the music stopped. Silence. The air was thick with something unseen, an energy neither of them could explain. Emma's gaze fell on the vanity table. A diary lay there, its cover embossed with the initials E.H., hands trembling. She opened it. The final entry read, "He comes at night. He listens when I play. But I am afraid. The music is not mine anymore. And soon, neither am I." A chill ran down Emma's spine. Jake whispered, "Who's he?" A sudden gust of wind slammed the hidden door shut. The room plunged into darkness. And then, the piano began to play again. This time, it wasn't sorrowful. It was a warning. The piano played on its own. The melody was no longer soft and sorrowful. It was urgent, frantic, like someone was trying to warn them. Emma and Jake stood frozen in the darkened room, their flashlight flickering as if reacting to the unseen force around them. "Emma." Jake's voice was barely a whisper. Emma clutched Eleanor's diary in her hands. The words on the last page. "The music is not mine anymore, and soon neither am I," echoed in her mind. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the music stopped. Silence. The air was thick, heavy, charged with something they couldn't see, and then a soft tap, tap, tap echoed from the far corner of the room. Jake swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing, but the tapping continued. Emma's breath hitched. "It's coming from the mirror." The vanity mirror stood tall against the wall, its surface coated in a fine layer of dust. But as they watched, something impossible happened. A faint outline appeared in the dust, like fingertips trailing across the glass from the other side. Then, a single word was traced into the surface. "Help." Jake grabbed Emma's arm. "We're leaving. Now." Emma was still staring at the mirror, her heart hammering. The handwriting, it was elegant, delicate, just like Eleanor's cursive on the sheet music. She was still here, and she was asking for help. A shadow in the hall. They bolted from the hidden room, shoving the door open and stumbling into the hallway. The passage behind them seemed darker than before, like something unseen was watching. As they reached the music room, the grand piano in the foyer let out a sudden jarring chord, deep, dissonant, unnatural. Jake cursed under his breath. "I don't care what this is. We're getting out." They raced toward the front door, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. Jake grabbed the handle and twisted. It didn't budge. He tried again. No, it wasn't. Locked before. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the door. It was ice cold, unmoving, as if something was holding it shut. Then the chandelier above them swayed, the air shifted, and for the first time, they both felt it. They weren't alone. A presence loomed in the foyer, unseen but undeniable. It wasn't Eleanor. This presence was different, darker. A whisper, low and distorted, slithered through the air. "You shouldn't have come." The candlelights flickered violently. The piano let out another discordant note, as if struck by invisible hands. Jake backed away from the door. "Upstairs, now." Emma didn't argue. They sprinted up the staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. The moment they reached the second floor, the piano went silent again, but the house still felt aware, like something was hunting them. The locked room. They reached the upper hallway, breathless. Dust swirled in the moonlight, filtering through the tall windows. "We need to find another way out," Jake muttered, glancing around. Emma tightened her grip on the diary, the balcony in Eleanor's room. "If we can get to it, we might be able to climb down." Jake nodded. "Then we go back." But when they turned toward the hallway leading to Eleanor's hidden room, the door that had slammed shut earlier was now slightly open. A faint creaking sound echoed from within, as if someone was inside, shifting their weight on the old wooden floor. Emma and Jake exchanged a look. Jake clenched his jaw. "We have to go in." Emma exhaled shakily but nodded. They stepped forward. The air was colder inside. The piano in the corner was untouched, but the vanity mirror, it was no longer dusty. Instead, its surface was perfectly clear, and reflected in it was a figure standing behind them. Emma spun around. Nothing. She turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there, tall, shadowed, unmoving. Jake saw it too. His grip on the flashlight tightened. What is that? The figure in the mirror did not move, but slowly, a handprint appeared on the glass, pressing from the inside. Emma's pulse pounded in her ears. "Eleanor," she whispered. Then, the figure stepped forward, not in the room, but in the reflection. It moved toward them, but its footsteps made no sound. Its head tilted as if studying them. Then, slowly, its mouth opened, and the mirror shattered. The force sent Emma and Jake stumbling back. Shards of glass rained down, scattering across the wooden floor. For a long moment, nothing moved. The house was deathly silent. Then, faintly, a voice whispered through the room. "He's coming." The name in the dark. Emma scrambled to her feet, her breathing ragged. "We have to leave. Now." Jake grabbed her hand, yanking her toward the hallway. The air behind them grew heavier, like something unseen was gathering strength. The hallway stretched before them, endless and unfamiliar. It should have led back to the grand staircase, but now it didn't. Instead, the walls seemed closer, the corridor twisting in impossible ways. Doors that had been closed before were now open, leading to dark, empty rooms. A deep, rumbling sound filled the house. Not a voice, not music. Something older, something waking up. Jake pulled Emma toward a window at the end of the hall. "If we can break it." But when they reached it, the glass was gone. Instead, beyond the frame was only darkness, an abyss. Emma's stomach dropped. This house, it's changing. Jake's face was pale. It's not just haunted, it's alive. Loud bang rang out from the direction of the music room, the unmistakable sound of the piano slamming shut. And then, a slow, deliberate sound. Footsteps coming toward them. They couldn't see who or what it was, but they knew one thing. It wasn't Eleanor, and it didn't want them to leave. The footsteps echoed through the twisted hallway, slow and deliberate. Emma and Jake pressed against the wall, their breath shallow. The mansion had changed. The familiar corridors were now distorted, stretching longer than they should, leading into darkened rooms that hadn't been there before, and something was coming for them. Jake clutched the flashlight, its dim beam flickering. "We need to move, now." Emma gripped Eleanor's diary tighter. She could still hear the final words from the shattered mirror. "He's coming." Who was he? They darted down the corridor, the wooden floor creaking under their hurried steps. The hallways seemed endless, the paintings on the walls watching them with lifeless eyes. They passed doors that stood ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Then, a whisper, not from behind them, but from the walls. "Stay away." Emma nearly stumbled. The voice was faint, broken, like someone trying to warn them through layers of time. Jake tugged her forward. "Keep moving." They reached the end of the corridor and threw open a door, only to find themselves back in the music room. The piano stood in the same place, silent and imposing. The room was exactly as they had left it, except for one thing. The shattered mirror was gone. Instead, in its place, stood a figure, not a reflection, a real, breathing figure. The man in black, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The figure was tall, his features obscured by the dim light. He wore an old-fashioned suit, his posture unnaturally stiff. The air around him seemed wrong, darker, heavier. Jake instinctively stepped in front of Emma. "Who are you?" The man didn't move. Then a slow smile curled on his lips. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was deep, smooth, like a melody played in reverse. Emma's fingers dug into the diary. "Eleanor, did you know her?" At the mention of her name, the man's smile faded. A long silence stretched between them. Then, his voice turned cold. "She was mine." The air shifted violently. The piano let out a distorted, jarring note, as if invisible hands had slammed the keys. Emma's stomach twisted. "You did something to her." The man took a step forward. Jake yanked Emma's hand. "We need to go." The door behind them slammed shut on its own. The walls trembled, the air pulsing with unseen energy. The piano began to play again, not a melody, but a violent, chaotic pounding of notes, as if warning them. Then, the candles in the room blew out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The locked door. Emma gasped as the darkness pressed in around them. The only light came from Jake's flickering flashlight. The man in black had vanished. But they weren't alone. Something moved in the shadows, circling them. The walls groaned and the floor beneath them vibrating as if the house itself was breathing. Emma fumbled with the diary. "Eleanor tried to warn us. We need to find out how to stop him." Jake pulled her toward the far door. It was locked. He rattled the handle. "Come on." The air grew ice cold. A whisper slithered through the darkness. "You cannot leave." Jake slammed his fist against the door. "Emma, do something." Emma frantically flipped through the diary, searching for anything that could help. Then, her eyes landed on a passage. "He's bound to the music. The song must be finished. Only then will he be free." Emma's pulse pounded. "The song? It's unfinished. That's why the piano plays at 2 a.m. Jake turned to her. "You're saying we have to finish the song?" Emma nodded. "I think that's the only way to break whatever is keeping him here." Jake glanced back at the piano, its keys gleaming in the darkness. "Then we play the final note." Emma hesitated, then stepped toward the piano. The air around it pulsed with energy, as if something was watching. She placed her hands on the keys. The moment her fingers touched them, the entire house seemed to exhale. A single note rang out, then another. She followed the sheet music, her hands moving instinctively. The melody was haunting, but beautiful, a sorrowful lullaby trapped in time. As she played, the air in the room shifted. The darkness recoiled, pulling away from the walls. But then, a scream. Not from Emma, not from Jake, from him. The man in black reappeared, his form flickering like a broken shadow. His smile was gone, replaced by something twisted. "Stop." His voice was no longer smooth. It was distorted, filled with rage. The walls shook. The windows rattled. The entire house protested. Emma's fingers trembled, but she kept playing. The melody reached its climax. The final note was near. The man lunged forward, his form unraveling. His outstretched hand reached for Emma. She struck the last note. Silence. The entire house seemed to shudder. Then, a gust of wind tore through the room. The candles reignited, bathing everything in a warm glow. The shadows retreated, vanishing into the corners of the mansion, and the man in black was gone. The house remains. The tension in the air dissipated. The piano sat still, the keys untouched. Emma and Jake stood frozen, barely able to breathe. Jake exhaled shakily. Did it work? Emma glanced around. The room looked the same, but different. Lighter. The oppressive presence was gone. Then she noticed something. The vanity mirror. It was whole again, and in its reflection, Eleanor stood there. Her form was faint, almost transparent, but her expression was peaceful, grateful. She raised a hand in farewell, and then she faded away. Emma felt a lump in her throat. She's free. Jake glanced at the piano. And him. Emma swallowed. Gone. Jake let out a shaky laugh. Good, because I am never touching a piano again. Emma couldn't help but smile, despite everything. Let's just get out of here. This time, when they reached the front door, it opened without resistance. The first rays of dawn stretched over the horizon as they stepped outside. The house behind them stood silent once more, but as they walked away, a single note rang from the piano. Soft, gentle, a final goodbye. The first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of orange and pink as Emma and Jake stepped away from Blackwood Mansion. The air outside felt lighter, freer, as if the weight of the house's tragic history had finally lifted. But the single note that had played from the piano as they left still echoed in Emma's mind. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Tell me you heard that. Emma nodded. It wasn't him. It felt different. They exchanged a look. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both knew. Eleanor had played that note, a final farewell. The mansion stood quiet behind them. It no longer loomed as ominously as before. The windows, once like watchful eyes, were now just glass reflecting the rising sun. We should go, Jake said. Emma hesitated, then nodded. They walked down the overgrown path toward Jake's car. The gravel crunched beneath their feet, the world feeling strangely normal after everything they had experienced. As Jake unlocked the car, Emma stole one last glance at the house. For the first time, it truly looked abandoned. And yet, a part of her knew that the story of Blackwood Mansion wasn't entirely over. The research continues. Back in town, Emma couldn't shake the need to know more. Jake had dropped her off at her apartment, exhausted and wanting nothing more than to sleep. But Emma couldn't sleep. Instead, she opened her laptop and started digging deeper into Eleanor Hargrove's history. She already knew the basic story. Eleanor, a gifted pianist, had mysteriously died in the mansion decades ago, but there had to be more. After several hours of searching, she finally found something new. An old letter digitized in the town's historical archives. It was dated just weeks before Eleanor's death. The handwriting was elegant, cursive. Eleanor's dearest mother, I fear that I am no longer alone in this house. The music no longer belongs to me. Each night I hear him whisper. I see him watching. He does not want me to stop playing, but I must. I cannot let him take me. If I do not write again, know that I tried to fight. But music is a powerful thing, and so is he. Emma's hands shook as she read the final lines. She had been right. Eleanor hadn't just died. She had been taken by the presence in the house, and the music had been the key to everything. But then, Emma noticed something else. The letter wasn't addressed to just Mother. It was addressed to Margaret Hargrove. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Margaret Hargrove, the same name as the woman who had founded the town's music conservatory. Eleanor's mother had been a musician too, which meant Eleanor's story might not have ended at Blackwood Mansion. The conservatory's secret. The next day, Emma met Jake at the town's music conservatory. The building was old, but well maintained, with towering windows and a grand performance hall. Jake sighed as they approached. "I swear, if another piano starts playing by itself, I'm out." Emma smirked. "Noted." Inside, the conservatory smelled of polished wood and aged sheet music. They wandered through the halls, passing students practicing on various instruments. Emma stopped in front of a display case. Inside was an old photograph of Margaret Hargrove, Eleanor's mother. She stood beside a grand piano, her expression proud yet somber. Next to the photograph was something else, a single sheet of handwritten music. Emma's stomach turned. The notes, they were familiar. It was the same melody Eleanor had played. Emma turned to Jake. "I think the song wasn't just Eleanor's." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" Emma pointed at the sheet. "Her mother wrote it. Maybe she was trying to finish what Eleanor couldn't." Jake looked at the notes. "So, if Eleanor was warning us about him, maybe her mother was trying to stop him." Emma's fingers hovered over the glass. "But she never finished it either." Jake sighed. "And now what? Are you saying we need to finish the song?" Again, Emma hesitated. "No, we finished Eleanor's part, but her mother's part, maybe she was writing something to seal whatever was in that house." Jake shook his head. "Emma, we barely made it out last time. What if playing that brings him back?" Emma bit her lip. "Or what if it stops him for good?" Silence stretched between them. Then Jake groaned. "Fine, but if a single light flickers while we're playing, I'm leaving. The final composition." They spoke to the conservatory's director, an older man who was surprised by their interest in Margaret Hargrove's unfinished composition. She was a brilliant musician, he told them, but she never completed her final piece. Some say she simply lost the inspiration. Others, he hesitated. Well, there were rumors that she was afraid of finishing it. Emma and Jake exchanged a look. They sat at the grand piano in the empty performance hall, the unfinished sheet music in front of them. Emma took a deep breath. "Let's finish what she started." Jake placed his hands on the keys. "Here we go." They began to play. The melody was familiar, but the unfinished parts felt wrong. It was dissonant, unsettling. Emma could almost feel the weight of history pressing down on them. Then, a shift, not in the room, in the music itself. It was as if the song had been waiting for someone to complete it. The notes started to fall into place, the melody weaving into something whole. The final note rang out, and with it, a deep, exhaling sigh. The air in the hall warmed. The tension that had filled the room vanished. For the first time, Emma felt truly at peace. Jake let out a breath. "Is it over?" Emma nodded. "I think so." They both turned to the sheet music, and there, as if written by an unseen hand, the final notes had appeared. The song was complete. A new beginning. Days passed and the mansion remained silent. No more piano playing at 2 a.m. No more whispers in the dark. Emma visited one last time, standing before the grand piano in the foyer. The house felt different now. Empty, yes, but in a peaceful way. Eleanor's story had finally reached its end. As she turned to leave, she whispered, "Goodbye, Eleanor." No response came, just silence. For the first time in decades, Blackwood Mansion was at rest, and so was its music. Epilogue. The last note years later, a new family moved into Blackwood Mansion. They restored it, turning it into a historic landmark. One evening, their young daughter sat at the old grand piano, pressing random keys. Then, a single note played, soft, familiar, a melody that once haunted the house, now nothing more than an echo of the past. The house remained silent, and the music never played itself again.